day, learners. Welcome to TLE 9. Today is the start of our third quarter, and in Needlecraft, we're going to discuss all about world of knitting. For our learning competency, understand knitting as one of our Needlecraft technique. For the learning expectations, for this lesson, you are expected to, the first one is you're going to describe the definition and characteristics of knitted products. And second is you're going to identify what are the tools and materials that we're going to use in knitting. For our code, that would be TLE_HEHC9-12PK-2A-B-4. So let's go now with the history of knitting. Where does knitting came from? So the word knitting comes from the word knot. So it is derived from the Sanskrit word nayati. And in English term, nayati is to bind or tie together, to bind or fasten on, and third one is to put or gird on. As you can see in the picture, this is the first pieces of clothing made in the technique similar to knitting, wherein it is an Egyptian socks. So there are ideas that knitting began in the Middle East. So from there it came to Europe through the Mediterranean trade routes, and then after that goes to America. So in this picture, this is Reverend William Lee. So in 1589, he is a resident in England who invented the first knitting machine with beaded needle. So the two basic stitches is the knit and purl. So these stitches can be worked alone or together and form the basis of designs or dozens of designs as well as other stitches. So let's go now discuss the characteristics of a knitted products. The first one is knitting requires two needles and a continuous strand of yarn or a thread. Second is you're going to begin by making a slip knot on one needle and casting on the number of stitches that you're going to need in making your own project. So what is casting on? It is a term for creating a foundation of row on one needle. The third one is the basic stitches are created using both needles. So wrapping the yarn over one needle and drawing the wrap yarn through loops on other needle. Okay, so let's now proceed with the tools and materials. So one of the key factors to enjoy and have a smooth sailing in knitting activity is to have a good quality of your knitting tools. So aside from this, it has a great effect also to the end product of your knitting articles. Okay. So here are the list of tools or materials that every knitter should have. It is advised that knitters should have their own knitting bags to keep all the knitting tools and materials together for your safety, of course, also. The first one is yarn. It is a long continuous length of interlock fibers suitable for use in the production of textile. So you're going to use, for the beginners, you're going to use a synthetic yarn or better known as acrylic yarn. Next is knitting needles. Knitting needles are the most important tool in knitting. So they come in a variety of styles and materials. So what are those kind of styles? The first one is straight pointed needles. Okay, it have a pointed end, and when you're going to work it with a pair of straight knitting needles, the work is done with a flat or in rows. Then, second is circular knitting needles. So these are the needles that are connected together with a cord. So the cord is usually plastic but may be created out of other materials. Next is double pointed knitting needles. So these knitting needles have points on both ends. Okay? So what are the materials that is made of knitting needles? So the first one is plastic knitting needles. So these needles are ideal for the beginners and are the least expensive. Next is metal knitting needles. It is stronger and more durable than the other materials, but metal knitting needles are cold to touch. Next is word knitting needle. So these are very much popular. So they are initially cold but will warm up from the heat given by your hands when you are using this one. Next is bamboo knitting needle. So these are made of bamboo. It is imported from Japan and it is also a lightweight and strong. Next is resin knitting needle. So these are hollow, so they weigh less than many other materials. And lastly, it's a glass knitting needle. So glass is heavier than the other materials. So they are very much smooth and slippery. So you may have trouble on doing this on your stitches or maybe in some place. Okay, next is cable stitch holders. So these are used to hold stitches in front or back of the work that create a cable pattern. And next is stitch marker. So you're going to use this and slip onto the middle between the stitches to indicate a change of pattern. So you can use this one as your guide also if you're going to change the color of your yarn. So there's a given guide in order for you to come up with different kinds of colors to work on your project. Next is stitch counter. So they are used to help keep track of the number of stitches in a row or to indicate where the stitch pattern starts or ends. So you can use this. It's either digital or manual. You just have to press for digital, and manual you have to turn it around. Okay. Next is scissor. Scissor is used to cut the excess yarn from your project. And yarn bobbins, so they are made of plastic, come in several shapes and sizes. So you're going to use this to hold small amounts of colored yarn. Next is sewing needles. So these are helpful for weaving in the ends of your knitting project and for sewing together the pieces of garments, such as putting the arms on your sweater. Next is crochet hooks. So this may be used to pick up those drop stitches. You can also use for binding of stitches or for slip stitching together those knitted pieces. And next is stitch holder. This is used to hold stitches that are to be worked later and is available in many sizes. As you can see in the picture, there is this small, medium, and large. Okay, next is knit gauge or a ruler. So it is very important in getting knitted items in the right size since in this item, it has different sizes of holes. So in order for you to get the right size of your knitting needle. Okay, so next is yarn swift. It is used to hold the hanks of yarn while it is being wound into balls. And tape measure is a ribbon of cloth, a plastic or a metal with a linear. So it is a measure markings in either both imperial or in metric units. Next is yardstick. It is a tool used to measure the distances up to 3 feet. So most of the yardstick are flat wooden boards with black markings and regular intervals in metal tips. So sometimes in yardstick it is made of wood, foldable wood, or a flat straight uh, wood. Okay. Next is point protector. This is used to prevent damages to your knitting needle points or the tips. So sometimes it is a cone shape or others have character shapes. So that's it. Thank you for listening, everyone.